Hello and welcome to the Gauntlet Podcast. Each month we look back at games played by Gauntlet folks. My name is Lowell and I use he, him pronouns. Today I'm joined by my co-host Shane. Shane, how are you doing?
Good, thanks, Lowell. I am recording today from the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and sovereignty was never ceded. And I use she and her pronouns.
Excellent. And we also have with us Ray. Ray, how are you doing?
Hi, Shane. Hi, Lowell. I'm doing pretty good, actually. I'm very excited about lots of cool things happening. So, hey, everybody. I'm Ray. My pronouns are he, they, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. This is very exciting. This is an episode where I'm very much looking forward to this sort of the middle section, which is more than looking forward to me being able to babble about the games at the start, which is usually my strength. So for our first segment, each of us gets to go over some of the RPGs that we played. In this case, it's sort of July, August, and we're going to talk in depth about one game that we played on the Gauntlet calendar or elsewhere. So Shane, how was your gaming in July, August?
July was a bit of a lighter month for me. I was moving house and things like that. So off the Gauntlet, I got to play a little bit of Brindlewood Bay and Escape from Dino Island. And on the Gauntlet, I played Twilight Throne, the Twilight Throne in the Houses of Ruin. Somebody here might know a little about that. And
I'm dancing off, on screen for people who can't see us right now.
Yes.
And Himbos, which is what I'm going to talk about today. Himbos of Myth and Mettle.
Ooh.
Himbos of Myth and Mettle is a fantasy game by Maxwell Lander. It had a fairly recent successful itch funding campaign, so you can find it on itch.io. It's a zine-length fantasy game about big, strong, hot, helpful, but not especially smart heroes of all genders. There's a cute little sidebar about the history of adjectives like himbo and bimbo and thembo, and the ways that they can all be gender neutral or at least gender flexible, and that we're not bound to any ideas about the gender binary just because we're playing himbos. I love this PDF as a thing in itself. Mostly when I'm looking at a game PDF that is like a list of instructions that I'm going to use to run a game, all I want are the instructions to have a good time with my friends. But this one is so good. Everything about it is really gorgeous in a way that conveys the flavour and sensibility of the game, which is just a campy good time. So a campy good time to play, a campy good time to read. I love that about it. Some examples of what I'm talking about. The writing itself is really great, like the sentences are fun to read. I wanted to give an example. Describing one of the mechanics, Maxwell writes, when you use a point of heat, describe how your big bow action has a little extra spice. This is your Baywatch moment. Savour it, draw it out, describe the sweat glistening as it rolls down your neck, and how the backlighting gives a fine highlight to your traps. So many things. It's fun, it shows and tells you how to use the mechanic in a really concise and evocative way. And I think you can see there, Max co-hosts a podcast about reading RPG texts, and you can really tell that he cares about the craft of writing for games. It also looks really great. Things that I never really think about, like it has good font choices, the combination of like black text with purple highlights is really nice. Even the texture of the pages of the PDF, which is this kind of fake like pulpy grain, like you're looking at a old fantasy paperback, is really lovely. So all of those things together just make it such a fun experience to actually flip through and read for me. I was running it from a PDF, but I'm going to try and get a hard copy because I think it will look really nice on the shelf. I think, like, reflecting as I hear myself saying these things, I wonder if I'm just dating myself because the, 80s style pulp paper and the Baywatch references just feel really cozy to me. But I think it is, the game itself is just really fun to play with, to look through. Turning more to the content, I like a lot of darker themed games. Like I mentioned that I'm running the Twilight Throne, which is about as dark a themed game as I think I could find. I've run some, Delta Green, things like that. They're a good time for me. But it was great to play a game where the focus is just on characters who are helpful and nice and want to do good things. Maybe you're a little bit horny, but basically just want to be helpful. I appreciate that both for the experience itself, like it's a good time at the table, but also for the critique, which is mostly implicit and sometimes explicit, of more traditional fantasy gaming. I think that's cool. The way you create characters is really fun and tells us a lot about who these characters are and reinforces the sensibility. The first thing you do is roll a d20 3 times to randomly select aspects of your identity and appearance. And the first of those, so the very first thing you do when you create a character is you roll a d20 to find out what is big. It's a table called It's Big. You're going to find out your character is already big, all round they're big. But the first thing that you find out about them is what is especially big. And the answers can be euphemistic, but they can also just be very wholesome. So you might have a big heart, for example. There's a D20 physique table where all the options are about how big you are in different ways. So we're getting a lot of size out of our first 3 rolls, which is nice and thematic. You roll for your 4 stats, which are called breast, lips, thighs, and hands. And the main mechanic in the game is that when you need to overcome an obstacle, you try to roll under that stat on a d20, maybe with a bonus if you have a useful piece of skill or equipment. So that's pretty simple, easy to pick up. Each stat has a window of error from 1 to 5. You get a bigger window with a higher stat. And basically, if you roll over your target number but within your window of error, you get a success with a complication. Mm-hmm. And I thought that might be a bit fiddly to work out in play, but it actually worked well. So even with my extremely limited maths abilities, that was no problem at any point. And obviously, it's like a cool little bit of kind of PBTA style resolution merged with, what's largely a more OSR-ish influenced game, I think.
That's actually really, really clever now that I think about that. Like, what a great way to add that middle result to a thing. Neat.
Yeah. The magic system I thought was pretty cool. There's no spell list or anything like that, but you improvise magical effects. You describe what your magic is going to do, and there's a little table that lets you work out what the cost in heart points is going to be, which is the equivalent of HP. So, if your spell does damage, that's going to do 1 point. If it affects multiple people, that's an extra point. So you calculate a heart cost, and then you can cast your spell. Or you can try and cast your spell. You can roll dice to cast your spell. And for something that's basically pretty rules light, it has a lot of cool little mechanical details and things that I think worked really well in play. Some things I'm less sure about. I guess I'll say first of all, I plan to run this as a 2-shot, but our second session got cancelled due to technical difficulties, so I only have quite a limited experience to draw on here. If I ran it again, I would house rule that magic has a minimum cost of 1 heart. So that system, that table that I mentioned before, like there were a few times that people improvised magical effects that just didn't trigger any of the items in the table, so they were casting the spells without any cost. Maybe that's fine, maybe it encourages creativity, but I think it felt to me like, they were getting away with something a little bit, which, I want it to hurt just that little bit. Like we had, Vonan the Vixarian cast a spell to sort of expand and gird Bronan's throat so that he could swallow more spicy chicken wings. And that didn't cost any heart because no damage, no healing, So I would just make them pay a heart. Another thing about the rules, there is a kind of initiative system, and I just do not understand how the initiative system is supposed to work in play at all. So I ignored it, but I don't really care about initiative, so that was fine. I just skipped the initiative system. Another thing that I wanted to mention here, this isn't really something that I'm less sure about, because actually the game is super fun. That's really my feeling about it. I just thought this was so funny. In the Stars and Wishes, which, people who've played with the Gauntlet probably know is like this debriefing tool, so you ask people what they enjoyed and what they're hoping for in the next session. So I asked people what they wanted in the next session, and the way the adventure that I was running was laid out, the first part didn't have that much of a plot. It kind of set things up. They did some fun challenges. They got to meet some NPCs. And then we were going to head more into the more traditional fantasy adventure part in the second session. And in our Stars and Wishes, what did we get? Well, I would like to see a drag contest. This person would like to see some sort of lumberjack-related challenge. But we'd also like to see more of a traditional fantasy adventure plot. I was like, I can try and work with this, but you're making it difficult.
That's great.
I think we would have combined all of these things if we'd gotten that second session, but I just thought it was funny the way that all shook out and fitted together. So my takeaway, you should get this and you should run it. If you can, you should get the hard copy, but actually the PDF by itself is just really nice. And more games should be about nice people. I'm not, like, I do think that is something that can be hard to find, like, that so many games are about people who are edgy or damaged in different ways, and that can be interesting and fun to play. But it's good to have some variety and variation on that. I actually think quite a lot. This is quite a tangent, but I really like a lot of Delta Green adventures, but I just don't like Delta Green characters. Like, people who are just mean and can do any bad thing, and we kind of pretend it's a moral dilemma, but actually we're just going to kill people all the time. Like, that's not really a fun playstyle to me. So I would like to see the Himbos equivalent of, like, whatever Himbos is to OSR, I want to see that to Delta Green.
That's wild.
Wow, Lowell really has this faraway thinking expression that's just so perfect.
But I think you're right about those characters being Delta Green characters, and many of those being at heart dislikable. But I think about it because what immediately came to mind was like Monster Care Squad, where you're trying to be helpful, but your characters aren't necessarily nice. And I think there's a distinction there between sort of games with nonviolent resolution and games that encourage you to be nice people. I think there's a real difference.
Well, I mean, one game that plays with that in a super interesting way, I think, is Wander Home, where the characters often are deeply traumatized. Like, there's some quite complex character dynamics, but the play itself is quite pleasant and focused on, like, nice things happening a lot of the time.
Yeah, and a lot of the mechanics support, like, helping people in a genuine way, but not taking over other people's lives or solving their problems for them, which is a very nice even ground that I don't see in a lot of places. Yeah, I mean, I too would love to see, number one, I think Max is like an amazing person in the TTRPG space. I got to be on the podcast with him.
What is the name of this podcast?
Are we allowed to say swear words on this podcast?
I was about to ask.
Absolutely.
It's called Read the Fucking Manual. It's really good. They go, each episode tackles like a different, mostly it's been classic RPG text, but they're moving into more contemporary stuff. And they just do a sort of deep dive read through. It's really good.
That's great.
It's so good. And both Max and Aaron have like really great insights. And both Max and Aaron are great designers too. So it's really like, I love both of their work, and I'm so happy for this. I remember when Max was first talking about, and this is the fun part of Twitter, right? I know Twitter is a hellscape, blah, 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 but
it is.
The fun part of Twitter is seeing people go like, maybe I should make a game about blah. And so I still remember seeing Max's tweet about, should I make a game about Himbos? And then seeing it grow. And Max is also an artist, right? And so seeing the initial layout passes and stuff like that. Yeah, and I'm just so happy for more sweet, nice games. I say this as someone who struggles to design them. Cozy Town was my hardest game to design. And
That's
so
wild.
I think people like come in, see Cozy Town, which is like a sort of like Animal Crossing, Stardew Valley kind of vibe, it's like a quiet year except cozy and sweet, right? Is what Cozy Town is. And people get confused when they come to me through that game and they see the rest of my games. Like, you're monsters. It's the apocalypse. Twilight Throne. Like, it's all very like, it's hard for me to write. I only wrote Cozy Town because it was a game jam thing where we had to write cozy, sweet games. And so I think they're hard to, I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think it's just because most of us come from an idea of like, when you play a game, video games, TTRPGs, there's a challenge of some kind, there are stakes of some kind, and usually it's about violence of some kind. And so it's just natural for things to be like that. So I think it's just really, I don't think it's impossible, but I think we just all have to get into, I'm really talking to myself, get into the habit of like designing and creating more nice, happy things.
No, I definitely want to encourage your darker tendencies because it's been such like fun gaming. I definitely don't want all of my games to be nice and friendly.
I'll go next. Off Gauntlet, over this period, I played Hearts of Within. I've run some Hearts of Within for some people that asked to play it, and I've done some series of that. I've also been playing 13th Age with the local home group, and we've been doing Mage, Powered by the Apocalypse, that hack that's been out for a while. We've been playing that on off Sundays. And then on the Gauntlet for the game facilitator camp, I did Karen, which is an OSR game, Monster Hearts 2, Scum and Villainy, Aegon, Brindlewood Bay. I think that covers everything that's kind of on the list there. And then also, I've been doing a quarterly series of the Veil Iterations, which is a kind of a play test of some rules reworking of the Veil, which I really love. And eventually I'll talk about that, or Sherry will talk about that. But what I want to talk about today is Curse of the House of Rookwood. And this is a game that I played. It's a Gothic horror story game where you create this cursed family, and then you play out their tragic, twisted, doomed story. So it's a real classic, dark Gothic feel to it. It's written by Michael Addison and Brian Bin from Nerdy Puppy Games. It was kickstarted. And it was one of those times, I've had this several times now, where I did I kickstart this at the physical copy? I'm glad I did. And because it's a nice little book. It's just a little bit bigger than paperback size. It's got a nice hardcover. It looks pretty. It actually has really good choices for the, how people will take the Creative Commons or old public art. And sometimes the choices aren't great. The choices in here are smart. It's a nice little book. Really, really, really nice. The PDF is beautiful. And the physical copy is great. Donna was nice enough to see that I had put this on a kind of a short list of games that I had kickstarted or bought or whatever that I wanted to play. And he ran it for 4 sessions on the Gauntlet. And it's a game definitely with a Victorian vibe, but we're not kind of locked into that entirely. It has notes on doing this in other eras and other settings. So let me talk about what really worked for me. One of the things I really dig, and I think it's easy to steal for other games, is that you begin with this collaborative creation of the family, of the manor. There's a set of 7 cursed questions that you use to create the backstory for the family and its history and what the curse is and what it looks like. And then you move into a really nice, solid, concrete structure for building the assets of the family. These are legacies and resources. So you've got money, you've got resources at the manor itself, like occult libraries or, opulent kitchen. You've got the name, which is the family reputation. You've got favors, which are debts owed to the family. And you've got power, which are like seats in government, etc. So there are 5 of these areas, and you've got 7 points to divide amongst them. And when you assign a point, then, and Donna did this by kind of distributing it around amongst the players, you define what that is. Like, this is a seat at the House of Lords. Ooh. Or this is a favor owed from a general who served in a company related to this. So it's a nice little bit. Those legacies, you got the names to them, but they actually have a real mechanical use when you get into play, that essentially you can mark them during a session to give an extra die. And it's simple, it's easy, but the actual sort of building process feels very smart and collaborative. The game also has a really simple character creation. There's 3 traits, and you get 6 points to put amongst them. You have a few personal assets that you define that can get tagged to give yourself a bonus later. There are 3 if you're cursed with a supernatural curse, and 6 if you're kind of as Ondish was, a non-magical person who just happened to be in the family and was going, oh no! And that was pretty good. You have a curse, which gives you kind of a rite of passage. It gives you a set of gifts and powers that you get. And it also gives you a set of escalating marks, like a character had these raven powers, and he started out with raven black eyes, and then later on he got kleptomania and things like that. So there's a kind of a nice built-in sequence for that. Then your character also has a drive that's called a spine, some bones, which are game keys. Essentially, if you do this, you get to refresh this. and then your spade. So that's the big arc change triggers. If this happens to your character, it changes them, you make these changes. This is all kind of in the building part. Lots of little details, a little more substantial than you get in a lot of sort of easy games, but not overly much. Everything feels like it helps develop the feel and the flavor of the game. I also like the dice system. It's a D6 system. You've got those 3 sets of stats, and you can assign dice based on them, and you kind of choose your risk. Like, you can use 3 dice or whatever, but it gives you more of a chance of success in that you might roll the X numbers more often. But bad things happen when there's doubles. So the doubles kind of cancel out. It's a real simple push your luck system. Add to that the assets can be used either afterwards to do a reroll or beforehand to give yourself an automatic success. There's some neat stuff there. I also like that the game has built in, I think, 3 or 4 pages on how to play this as a generational game, in that you wrap up an arc with the family and then you move forward in time and you do the next generation, and maybe some people have older versions of their previous characters. I like that. Like, that's the kind of thing I really dig. That's definitely my jam. It's why I love Microscope. It's why I love Kingdom. And it's a game, any game that says, oh, you're going to have a ton of NPCs, you're going to have interaction with those NPCs, and we're going to do some scenes with the other PCs. Any of that stuff I adore. And I think this game really leans into that. That being said, I do have a few things that I'm a little bit less sure about. While I like the character creation, that whole curse and spine and so on, and I appreciate the examples given, the actual rules for those and details of them are sufficiently complicated enough that I don't think you could come up with it necessarily on the fly, just in a kind of collaborative thing. There are examples given in the book, and they're pretty good, and they're pretty rich, but you're really going to have to use those. And I think you would want to direct the players. I mean, players could modify them, but there's just so much going on in them, and they're all so flavorful. So I think if somebody came in with a strong sense of, I want my character to do X, and they hit that, they might have some issues. The book itself is about 136 pages long, and it has an index and everything, like all of that. 40 plus pages are given over to antagonists and stats for antagonists. And I don't know why, but that felt very weird to me, because we had very little combat or direct conflict per se. And it feels like maybe the game is pushing us to have more of that, which feels
like
off-tone.
It imagines that you're supposed to be fighting more.
Yeah, I don't know. It just feels like an odd choice to make that the details and the material that you're using to flesh the game out. Kind of related to that, the book itself doesn't do a great job of saying, hey, when you get to play, this is what you're actually doing. This is what a session structure looks like. These are what you're going to typically be doing. These are kinds of things for that. It feels like it needs a little more GM discussion of, this is how a session should operate. This is what a campaign should look like. Maybe these are some things you can do. It needs more of that. There's a lot of grab bag ideas and really good high concept materials, but I'd like a little more help for the GM for session play beyond like giving us a bunch of foes. And it's a minor thing because the game is fun, and Donna really took the rich material that we gave and worked with it, but it needs a little bit more. The dice system also, I do like it when you roll X number, and I can't remember what the number is, to gain a success. You get these successes on the dice, and then you spend them to get what you wanted, or avoid the risk that you established before you rolled.
Oh.
And then if there are additional successes, you can buy, bonus effects or whatever. So if you only roll one success, you then have to choose to not get the thing that you wanted, but you want to avoid the risk. And that's a really funky little thing, because it's very easy when you're kind of framing things up to kind of not realize that, okay, like when I actually get the roll, if I only get one success, like one kind of obviates the other at times. You kind of have to know well how to set that framing. And that's the thing you learn over time. And I think as we got along and we played, we realized that, okay, I don't want to set this as the stakes because, if I don't like have that, it'll knock out the other thing. It's weird. It's the same problem I have with Kingdom. Like, I love Kingdom, but there's some elements of Kingdom that, in terms of how you frame stuff and set questions and things like that, that if you haven't played it before, it's very easy to do a question that is going to land like a lead balloon. And I think that's a problem. It's essentially, the first time you might not have a great experience like a board game, and then, okay, well, you might win next time, that kind of thing. The only other thing I mentioned is that, like any kind of very character-heavy game, it requires, especially, and this is here, that your characters are not good people. They're part of a cursed family. They're likely, like, they're leaning into the curse. They're likely using it for their purposes. So they're not great people. And I think that requires players to play with a little more vulnerability to show why these characters kind of mess themselves up and so on. And to not play defensively. I think that you need players that are willing to do that and give themselves over to that. If you've got players that like don't like to fail, or don't like to look ludicrous, or don't like to be, it's kind of stuck on the bottom or mess up, those players may not enjoy this game as much. But I went a long time on what I'm less sure about. But I wanted to because I do dig this game. I think it's really fun. I had a great time playing out the stories of these characters. And in just 4 sessions, I went from an absolute jackass to a semi-redeemed absolute jackass. And I love having a character arc. So that...
If only that could be true for all of us in real life.
Yes, yeah,
we
exactly.
could do it in 4 sessions to have a semi-redemption. That'd be great.
Yeah, it was good. I've spent some time thinking about it, and I if I went to run this, I thought about some things and the kind of materials I would write up to help out playing. I think it's a pretty good game, and if any of this kind of gothic story gamey stuff with a light mechanical system appeals to you, I think Curse of the House of Rookwood is a good thing. And I didn't stress this enough. It would be easy to adapt to other settings, to other time periods, Elizabethan, or basically any Southern Gothic in the or any kind of family drama you could build up with this. Downton Abbey, but with demons or something. I don't know.
Oh wow, that's like an immediate selling
That's
point.
quite the pitch.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Had either of you heard of this before?
Oh, no, not before today. Not before you mentioned it.
Really?
Yeah, I have heard about it. I knew some people who got to work on the game, but it's like on my list of like the many interesting games that I'd love to play. And before we started recording, I did say how before the end times, I used to have a group I would force to play a new indie game every 3 weeks. This would definitely have been on the list. So yeah, but super, super interesting. Also, that's a good point you brought up about you setting up the stakes, but then shifting how you set it up because you might have to deal with it later. That's like a really weird mental bit of gymnastics. Yeah.
We got in a couple cases where somebody would set the stakes and set the success, what the risk was and what they wanted to have happen. And then when we got to play, if they chose that they had the thing happen, by nature of that choice, they couldn't have the failure occur at the same time. So you really had to get them on separate tracks.
Yeah.
So one wouldn't undercut the other.
Even though there's a natural human tendency to have your stakes affect the success, I think.
Exactly. You're like, okay, this is a binary A, B. No, it has to be kind of different directions.
Yeah, interesting. No, but that's what, because like I was thinking about that, like devil's bargains are kind of the same in Forged in the Dark. I realized like one of the pitfalls of a GM with Blades in the Dark is your devil's bargain will often undercut the success. And it's like, then it's not a really good devil's bargain, right? Because the whole point is, I want to say yes to this, but if you're going to take away my possible success, why will I? Anyway, I was just thinking about like...
Yeah, no. For more discussion of this, you can listen to our podcast episode on hard moves and choices that we did last year.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
The next Gauntlet Community Open Gaming will be happening the weekend of September 22nd through the 25th of 2022. GCOG is the Gauntlet gaming community's free online tabletop RPG convention. Over the weekend, we'll be offering more than 24 sessions with games like Twilight 2000, The Final Girl, Swords Without Master, Our Haunt, and more. All sessions are run with a set of safety tools and follow the Gauntlet Code of Conduct. Registration opens Tuesday, September 6th at 12 noon U.S. Eastern Time. We created the con to help new players get used to online play, showcase indie games, and introduce folks to our community. If you want to check out the event listing, go to bit.ly/GCOG events, all smashed together. For more details on registration and procedures, go to bit.ly gauntlet-community. We hope we'll see you there. Listeners, for our second segment, Ray is going to kind of combine the first segment stuff to talk about the game, but mostly we just want Ray to talk about the topic that they have chosen to talk about. So we're going to go there. Ray, give us the story. Give us a scoop.
Yeah, I'm so excited. But Apocalypse Keys is crowdfunding, so that is like a huge deal. So people who have been listening before to some of our episodes will know that Apocalypse Keys has been like a long time in the making. I was talking about it on the Gauntlet podcast like years ago. I think like around a year or 2 years ago. I have to double check actually. So Apocalypse Keys, before I get carried away and get into it, I should say what the game is. So Apocalypse Keys is a game powered by the apocalypse, and you play as powerful monsters holding back the apocalypse as well. So you must investigate mysteries, hunt down the harbinger, grasp at keys. Keys are like clues or understandings or vignettes or little things, and unlock Doom's door before it's too late. So it's mainly inspired by Hellboy, especially the films, though I did lean into the comics quite a bit. But like looking back as we worked on it, it also has a lot of other different influences, but it's generally like a dark, heroic, almost anti-hero kind of quality about it. There's a lot of emotions, a lot of queerness, a lot of divine horror, and the action is ramped up to like a really extreme levels. One of the things that came back when we were working on developing the game with different people was Avery Adler was like, so this move means that if the player wants to just destroy the city, they can do that. And I was like, is that a bad thing? Like, this is a thing that Sean Nittner and I worked on for like months, and then at the end we were like, yeah, if they want to destroy the city, they can just do that, right? That's the whole point of this playbook. So it's on a really huge scale of action, but the emotions are just as big, and the mystery and the horror is just as big. And it, like I said, is powered by the apocalypse. It takes a lot from Brindlewood Bay, because when I played Brindlewood Bay on the Gauntlet, I was like, oh, this is how you do a mystery. Because like until that point, I had never played or run a game where I enjoyed the mystery component as much as I did with Brindlewood Bay, and that's really what pushed and inspired me to start working on Apocalypse Keys, basically. So it does take a lot from that, but there are a lot of like significant tweaks and approaches that I feel make Apocalypse Keys really special and come on its own. But it takes a lot from a lot of places. Like it takes stuff from Hearts of Wulin, which Lowell designed because I love that game. It takes a lot from Changeling that Lowell put together with Sherry.
Oh God, yeah.
It takes from Fashion de las Personas. So it's basically like a love letter to PBTA, now that I think about it, which is very evocative of my time on the Gauntlet so far, because we play a lot of PBTA and we talk about the games a lot here. And yeah, like I really do think if it wasn't for the Gauntlet, I wouldn't have even started working in Apocalypse Keys, and I wouldn't have been able to develop it and refine it, because before that, because I've been making games for like I think almost 3 years now. I think a little more than that now that I think about it.
I think so.
Yeah, wow. I feel aged all of a sudden. It was a long time ago. But yeah, so at first I was working on very small games that you could only play in a session or two, because at the time it was just easier to design and test those games it was harder to work on like huge games, longer games, because I couldn't consciously, I was like, well, how am I supposed to get a group together that can play test consistently like a longer game? But the Gauntlet has such a really supportive environment that really does celebrate indie gaming. And I just felt like it was something that I could do like confidently on the Gauntlet. I was like, as I was working on it, I was even thinking of like specific people I would play with regularly. So I was like, will Leandro like like this particular mechanic? What would Sherry think about this? And so it just made it that much easier. And I have to stress, like, because I got lucky with Apocalypse Keys. Evil Hat approached me, asked if they could publish it. And so someone asked, like, did you know that was going to happen? Did you keep working at Apocalypse Keys, you know, thinking that would happen? I was like, I had no idea. I just really hoped, like, as I worked on it for like a year and developed it through the Gauntlet and tested it, I was just like, I just really love the game and I really love playing with people on the Gauntlet. And it would be nice if it could get published because it's such a big game and I'm spending so much time and energy on it. But I had no idea if that was going to happen. So it's really such a dream come true that I get to say, it's coming to Kickstarter, it's crowdfunding. It's like, it's already laid out. We're just waiting for the art to come in. It's like 380 pages. It's ridiculous, including the index and everything, but it's ridiculous. Yeah. But yeah, so yeah. I'd love to talk about Apocalypse Keys with the both of you though. Like,
I think the thing I want to say is playing Apocalypse Keys, maybe really go back and look at Hellboy, the comics and the movies and realize just like you remember the visual panache and you remember the fight scenes, but so much of it is about real angst and mistakes and flubbing up and trying to fix your own problems and kind of hurting each other. It's that I think that's getting lost, but that's what this game brings to the table is that core emotional play and
for sure.
And it's interesting because when I think of Apocalypse Keys and what I loved about it when I ran it is just the scale of the action, like you were talking about, Ray. You know, like whenever I got to make a GM move, I just had to think of the most over-the-top thing that could possibly happen in this moment. I remember the one that stands out in my memory is like somebody, you know, rolling to grasp at a key, I think, and missing. And so the reaction was, okay, your body becomes a portal to the cockroach dimension and thousands of cockroaches pour out through your mouth and start their invasion of the earth. And it was like,
perfect.
Like it was really disgusting and fun, but also like something that the characters would like just take in their stride because they are so powerful that that's like, you know, that's Tuesday. Like, yeah.
Yeah. And I think like, it's because as a GM, and I think like Lowell, you can relate to this because when I read and play Hearts of Wulin, I can see how you designed it around your GMing style, right? And I think this is true for a lot of games. I feel like Blades in the Dark is the same, right? Like it's designed around John Harper's GMing style in a lot of ways, I think. And so my GMing style is I really want you to be as powerful as possible because I will never run out of ways it can get worse. I remember during one of the early playtests, Daryl Ross, they like typed in the chat, oh no, Ray ran out of horrible things that could happen to our characters on a large scale. Said no one ever. Like, things just keep getting worse and worse. And I was like, it's true. And so, because I want GMs to be fans of the characters, of the players, but to not feel like they have to handle them with kid gloves, right? Because they are playing incredibly powerful monsters. They can handle a cockroach dimension and punching in hours and, you know, and what that could mean, right? So, but can they handle the heartbreak of their ex suddenly showing up and being a harbinger now? That's a different story.
So at what point did you know you wanted to kind of change the mechanical nature of the moves? Because it's not standard PBTA. It's that, what I would call, sweet spot PBTA, or I don't know if you have a term for it. Like can you talk about what that is and how that changes the dynamics of the game?
Basically, in PBTA, right, we're used to higher is better. So this, I think it first came from this discussion I saw online about how much people didn't like stats in PBTA games. Like it sort of felt like a vestigial thing from other games, like in the same way that D&D has like wisdom and charisma and blah blah and stats, like and so there was this person, and there were like lots of people actually on Twitter who went in on it, but like the one that really got me was one by Sydney, and they talked about how like they were really breaking it down to describing how stats are only interesting when you first make a character, and then after that, like it's just very bland. And it's true, because you would end up doing this weird min-maxy. I noticed with PPTA, the moment you get a +3 in something, that's it. Like it is very unlikely, unless you roll like Patrick, maybe shout out to Patrick. I love you. I'm just joking. Where, you know, it's just likely that you'll at least hit a mixed success with a +3, right? And so it just made the game that much more predictable, among other things. And so what Sydney pointed at was a game called Libreté by, and I'm going to do my best to pronounce, Vivian Fiasson. I'm really sure I didn't pronounce that properly. I apologize deeply. But Vivian basically has this like really amazing system, which to other people looks like a mix of belonging outside belonging and PPTA, right? Where because you're playing children in this really awful world. It's post-apocalyptic. I've played the game and it's very difficult to play for good reasons, right? Because you're just children in a messed up world, and the game does such a good job where you have to act in a certain way to gain tokens in order to roll with them, right? Those are your bonuses to your roll, and they reflect how, as a child, you are struggling in this world. And so it's very painful. You have to hurt yourself and hurt others. It's called bile, right? Like you build up bile and then you roll with that. So it's very appropriate for the game. And when I saw it, I was so amazed with the idea. I tried it a few times with some other games, but it made sense in Apocalypse Keys, and it made sense because I often saw Hellboy when I was reading the comics being like, yeah, this is him going too far. He was just trying to punch a guy and instead got this demon to come out, right? Because like the demon reacted to like the key that is like his arm, right? And so it was like, this feels like going too far. So that was one. It was mostly Sydney and that tweet and the trying to move away from stats into something more interesting that focused on narrative and emotional play and role playing and being able to like embody your character and gaining bonuses to rolls through that. But it was also because my partner rolls too high all the time and I wanted to punish him. So I love Matthew, but he always friggin' rolls 10 to 12s in PBTA games. And I love watching him play Apocalypse Keys because he goes too far all the time. And I'm like, mwah, finally. But yeah, so it creates this like tension in the game where you're trying to hit an 8 to 10, right? And so you can gather the bonuses, but then you have to ask yourself, am I going to spend all 3 that I can? Because like it's 0 to 3 that you can spend per roll. Should I spend all 3 to make sure that I get this no matter what, even if it means I go too far? Or am I going to try to hit that 8 to 10? And the dice they're so unpredictable, right? I know there are bell curves and statistics, but when you're playing, it doesn't feel like it. It feels like you and the dice, right? So it also feels like a monster dealing with their power of darkness. Like how much can they trust themselves in order to just get this right? So it's really this trying to merge what happens mechanically and narratively into the system at the same time, which reflects a lot of the design, which I was having a lot of fun with. So, yeah.
I feel like a redesign of masks that took that approach to represent like kids being uncertain about their powers would be really interesting. So
cool, right? That'd be super fun, especially if you still somehow kept the shifting labels, because I really did like that. That was really cool. But then it was weird because whenever I played with people, and I guess it's a mindset thing, but there were times when I played with people and they're like, oh, I feel like I'm being punished, right? Because my stats keep shifting and moving and I can't control it. And I'm like, no, that's just being a teenager.
Do you think there's a metaphor there?
I remember one of the things was Sean, while we were working in the game, I really had to stress Sean is the project manager at Evo Hat, but he ended up becoming a developmental consultant because I talked to him every week. We would have like 2 to 4 hour conversations about Apocalypse Keys for like months. And one of the things he brought up was, don't you think it's too easy that people can pick up as many tokens as they want in order to roll high or try to roll high? And I was like, no, because in order for them to pick up the tokens, they have to do specific in-character things. So they're playing the game. I'm not going to punish anyone for playing the game and being emotional and being monstrous, right? And, getting into it. So Apocalypse Keys is a game that rewards you the more into it, the more monstrous, the more you lean into it, basically.
I think I would almost say the opposite. It's a game that punishes you the more you lean into it, and that's the joy.
I still remember the early recordings, like Leandra was running a game, and I remember Sabine's face when they rolled and they hit the perfect 8 to 10, and Sabine was like, oh no, I wanted to go too far though. And Leandra was like, do you want to spend tokens to say you go, do you want to spend bonds to say you go too far? Because you can spend bonds after a roll to try to hit. Normally people spend the bonds to try to hit the 8 to 10 range, right? You spend bonds that you have connections with other people, and that describes your amount of control. But Leandra's like, do you want to spend them to go too far? And like say like something goes wrong. And Sabine's like, no. It's fine. I'll stick to this. But it was so, when I was playtesting, when I was playing Apocalypse Keys, it was so hard for me to hit the 8 to 10 range. I was so often going too far missing, which felt great. So it felt just and good for me to be suffering under the game I created.
Can you tell us anything about what the campaign is going to look like? I'm always curious about what you know ahead of a campaign about stretch goals or things like that. Is there anything you can say?
I think so. I also do want to say, like, I'm very, very lucky. Like, this is the third time I'm working with a publisher and going to Kickstarter. And so it's really interesting to see the way different publishers handle it. And Evil Hat really, I just feel that they're very invested in me becoming a designer who understands what the TTRPG landscape is like, which is very interesting. Like I really do feel that I've grown a lot as a designer by working with Evil Hat. And so, so we went over stretch goals. We went over what we'd like to do, who we'd like to invite to do what. And so what we have now is like, this is just like hypothetical. We're hoping, I don't know what's going to happen in terms of like, so please, go check it out if you like it. It'd be great if we could do these stretch goals. But we do have some really exciting ones where other people will be writing mysteries and writing up factions or harbingers. Those are things that we added into the game after the open playtest version. So we're not doing too many playbooks because designing an Apocalypse Keys playbook is very difficult because of the nature of there are no stats, and they're just, I could talk about like an hour.
It's so many facets to it.
Yeah. And getting them to interlock properly is like really difficult. Like I added a new playbook after the open playtest, and that took like a whole month of just intense work because it was the 7th playbook by that point. And how do you differentiate it from the others? And like, how are the powers of darkness, which flavor the narrative, different from your actual abilities? And then it's so complicated. And so, but we do have a couple of writers. We're hoping for stretch goals, hoping for playbooks. I will also be hopefully working on a new playbook, only because I'm going to be honest, I can't stop thinking about Ghost Rider. And so I would love to have someone be able to make Ghost Rider in Apocalypse Keys. And the fun thing about a playbook in Apocalypse Keys is you cannot go with an archetype, right? You have to go with like a core monstrous thing, because I really like it when people take a playbook and push it into whatever direction they want, right? So even though the Summoned is based on Hellboy, I haven't seen anyone make a Hellboy yet, which is really funny. Even though if you look at the options, it's very clear how you build a Hellboy, but instead I have seen an android from a hell dimension. I've seen a crocodile monster obsessed with eating planets. I have seen like so many different things, nowhere near close to Hellboy, even though they're all like tied to a prophecy that haunts them, like Hellboy, right? So I want to create like what is going to be that core element of Ghost Rider that people will be able to like play with. So what I did though, what is only going to happen through the stretch goals, is something called the division branch, where people will be able to create different division branches. So division is, I'm going to pull up the book because it's such a complicated backronym that Matthew came up with that I absolutely love. So basically, the equivalent of the BPRD from Hellboy somewhat is the Department of Interdimensional Vigilance and International Security Interdisciplinary Operations Network, or Division.
Nice.
Every dramatic acronym in the book, Matthew was the one who came up with what it means. And so basically what would happen is Division is like where you come from, and then you go out and do the mysteries, right? You go out and solve the mysteries, you find out what the Harbingers are doing, you try to get to the ancient door of power and figure out what form it takes and get to it before the Harbinger does. But in playtests, a significant number of people would be so fascinated with Division and where they came from, right? And so, but the game is best when you, at first I was like, should I mechanically expand on that? But it kept removing things from the mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually what we decided is for the stretch goals and the contributors is they get to build division branches, which means this could be your home base or it could be division branches that you visit. And then maybe you can build mysteries out of it. So that's been really fun. They've been really fun to write because they are not the usual, oh, this is a mystery and these are the stakes and this is how the world's going to end. This is the doomsday clock. Instead, the division branches are, things are weird and supernatural and scary, but it's also kind of the Office over here. Like, this is where people like work on because not all of them are like monstrous agents, omens like you are. So, but yeah.
There's that bit in Warren Ellis's Planetary comic book where they go to different planetary offices, and I always love that from the comic.
Right. That's really good.
Well, so with crowdfunding coming up here in September, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Ooh, and one more thing I wanna mention that's really cool is because we took a little longer to put together everything for the crowdfunding. One really special thing we're looking at is a special edition of the book.
Ooh.
And so it's going to be really, really snazzy because basically the idea that we've come up with and that we're developing is that it's going to be an all black cover. And then when you touch it, you can feel where it's embossed differently. And when you hold it against the light, that's when the special cover will appear. So it's a super secret, super cool, which is very evocative of the mystery of the game. I won't spoil what it looks like just yet,
okay.
but it should be there. Hopefully, we'll see. We're working with the artists right now. They're very, very cool. So the art in general is just amazing. We were able to work with Adrian Valdez for the cover, who did work for Once More Into the Void and Twilight Throne. And for the iconics, like the playbook art, we got Adrian Stone of like Spire fame to work on those, and it looks absolutely amazing. It's so good. But all the art has been coming in. My day has been like 3 to 4 hours every day going through emails from the artists and like giving my feedback, and it's really good. It looks, there's so much art. There's like an extreme amount of art that's going to be in the book.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we are super. I think I can speak for Shane here.
You really
super looking forward to this. Just so pleased that this is happening for you. Listeners, for our third segment, we're each going to discuss something that is lately inspiring us or giving us joy. So, Shane, what is giving you life?
You know, I had totally forgotten this segment was coming up somehow. So now I'm just thinking, what has been? So I have started taking weightlifting classes at a local gym.
Ooh.
So weightlifting, like not in the like general sense of just like picking up weights, but weightlifting like the Olympic event that has you do the snatch and the clean and jerk, those specific lifts. So both about picking up a barbell from the ground and putting it over your head in these complicated ways. And the gym that I've been training at is called Pony Club Gym. It's local to the house that I recently moved to. It's a very explicitly inclusive, queer and trans-friendly gym.
Oh, nice.
Oh, that's so cool.
And it's just been such a joy and delight to go to these classes with other queer people and do exercise for the first time really since before the pandemic. It's been really great. So that has been giving me life. I do find it incredibly annoying that my mental health is better when I exercise. That doesn't seem fair, but it is a fact. My mood is better.
It is what it is.
So,
yeah.
For me, it's been a bunch of Gauntlet stuff lately, doing 3 different game facilitator camps. I did a Gauntlet talks on hacks, and I'm going to do another one on mysteries, and I've got a couple other lined up. I've done some stuff I'm really happy with on the blog lately. So I've been really happy with my productivity across there. Mind you, it is done in avoidance of other bad things that I don't want to have to deal with beyond the pandemic. So maybe that's not the greatest thing in the world, but I am pleased with what I've been able to produce, given how much the pandemic has impacted my productivity generally. Ray?
Yeah. So what's been giving me life is I recently moved to, like Shane. We're still technically in the middle of doing it. These things are still in boxes. We have way too many books. But I used to live in an apartment. We lived there for like more than 10 years. We lived on the 36th floor.
Ugh.
And so I got used to the rain forming below our floor, right? So I would see the clouds like amass and then rain below, but it wouldn't reach us. And there are lots of things like the slightest earthquake down below, because I live in the Philippines and along the Ring of Fire, so like small earthquakes are very normal. But on the 36th floor, they don't feel small. Like the books start moving and the bookshelves like swing side to side normally.
Oh, wow.
It's just a thing. So, but now we moved to like this nice small townhouse. We're like on the ground again. I'm still getting used to when I drag a chair. I keep thinking, oh no, the neighbor downstairs. And I think, oh, there's no neighbor downstairs. It's just this. And I get to look outside and there's trees and greenery. I get to see the rain properly. There are birds, because I lived in a city where like there are only like specific places that are green, like 2 parks, which I can't see from my window. Everything else is like stone and concrete and building. And so here it's a lot nicer, but we're still like 5 minutes away from the nearest ridiculously huge mall. So it's really nice. It's really been giving me life. It's so nice to smell fresh air, which I take for granted, which I'm trying to not take for granted, I mean. So it's been really, really great, but also good for my mental health. It's also very annoying that fresh air and greenery helps my mental health, because you can't get that very easily in most cities. So, but there you go.
Awesome. That's our show. Thank you so much for playing with us. You can check out the show notes for links about the games we've discussed, and we'll try to make sure I remember to put the podcast that we mentioned there for Max in that. You can find out more about the Gauntlet at www. Do I need to really say www? I don't know. But it's at gauntlet-rpg.com, where you can find articles like our big blog resources, info about the podcast, and links to our forums, and a ton of other stuff there. Our community code of conduct, all kinds of resources for online play. That's all there. And you can find out about how to play with us on the Gauntlet. There's lots of details. You can also follow us on Twitter at GauntletRPG. Doing the Twitter kills my soul a little bit each day, but I do it. So please go and read it, like, share, and subscribe. If you're interested in playing with the Gauntlet, as I said, do check out our forums or check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Gauntlet. Remember, the hard part is spelling Gauntlet right. Shane, thank you for coming on at this, what is it, a reasonable hour for you, but it was a hellish hour for me.
Sorry about that.
Oh, time zones.
Yes, yeah. I should tell the listeners I messed up the time. I got they're in a different day than I am, and I messed that up, so.
No worries.
And Ray, thank you. Just so happy for you.
Thank you so much. I owe so much to you and to the Gauntlet. I'm just so happy that Apocalypse Keys is gonna be out there soon. I'm trying not to cry on the podcast.
Oh,
I'm gonna focus instead on the way you said /. Do people say /? I think we just say slash, and then people assume it's a /.
But there's also backslash.
But when do we use it on the internet?
That's true.
Anyway, that's what I'm focusing on.
It's a lot to think about.
This is an existential question. But listeners, that was our show. Thank you so much.